Hello, my name is Carl Surrey and this is a video tutorial for the Facebook group called Fans of Serif Software. Now this is a tutorial for Serif's latest photo product on the PCs called Affinity Photo. Affinity Photo has been out on the Mac for a while, but it should still work just as well on the Mac version. Now in this tutorial we're going to be making a false reflection, a water and reflection in the lower half of an image. I originally did this back in 2015 on Serif's previous photo product called PhotoPlus, and that can be found on YouTube, and I think there is also a written tutorial for that which can be downloaded from the Facebook group pages. I have also done a written tutorial for this as well. Partly as there's a lot of processes in this, I'm going to use that written tutorial and read that as I go along to help remind me of what to do next. So if I do lose track a little bit, it might be because I'm looking at my notes and reading what to do next. Right. Now, there is going to end up being two versions of this because at first I couldn't work out how to use the displace map like it does in the Photoshop tutorials, which I am sort of borrowing the technique from. So the other version, I managed to get this version where the displace map has the ripples underneath a certain layer, and it has this effect, which is quite good. Or this effect where you can actually see like the proper ripples in the water, which is where the displace map is being used properly. So when we get to a certain point, I will tell you, to save the image where we are, and then I will show you how to do version 1 and version 2, and then it's up to you as to which version you like the look of. So let me get to the start image. Let me just close down these two here. I don't need those anymore. Now this process will work best on a landscape image, of pretty much obviously because you need the water and you're going to need a landscape to put it into. But if there's anything like this original picture, below it there was a bit of a car park area, and I cropped that off because I wanted it to look like a riverbank, and you're looking across the river towards this. When this is Walton Tower, where there is no river here. Like I said, there's a car park here. So if you need to crop your image down to suit whatever it is you want your final picture to look like. So once you have your final picture and you've opened it up, the first thing that we need to do is to make a copy of this layer. There's a number of ways you can do this. You can go to layer and duplicate, or as you can see here, you can press Ctrl and J, which will do the same thing. Or over here in the layers tab, and what I call the layers display area, if you right click this layer and come down to duplicate, you can do it that way. So you can see there's 3 different ways of duplicating the layers. Right, so now we have these 2 background layers. I'm going to rename these a little bit later, and I'll explain why when we get to that point. So now what we're going to do is if you click and highlight the bottom layer, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to extend the canvas below the image to make it larger, because this is where we're going to put the water effect. Now to do that, you come up to Document, Resize Canvas, or you can do Control Alt and C, and this opens this Resize Canvas panel. Now in the Photoshop tutorials, they use a % option, which would have been found within the units here, but Affinity Photo doesn't have a percent option. It did in PhotoPlus, but not in Affinity Photo. Not sure why Serif has taken it away, but we can get around that because up here we have the size of the image, and in between that we have a padlock. If you click on this padlock, it will unlock it, which means you can now alter one of these settings without affecting the other. And the setting that I want to alter is the height, which is the right hand one. Let's just go this way. And at the moment mine is 1707 pixels. Doesn't matter what unit of measurement you are using, be it point, inches, feet or whatever. Whatever the number is here, what you need to do is double it. So for me, 1707, when you double that, that is 3414. So I'll just do 3414. And then the next thing I want to do is this bit here, which has got anchor. At the moment, it has this bigger white square in the top left hand corner, but I'm going to click and put it into the top center. What this will do is to make sure that the image that is currently seen here stick to the top of the finished canvas size, and then the new canvas size will have to fit below because the image is taking up the top. So once you've set your new height size, put the anchor in the right place, just click resize, and there we have the new canvas on the bottom half of the image. Now, next thing we want to do is to highlight the top layer, making this the active layer, and then come over to the tools on the left hand side. You can either press V on the keyboard or click on the move tool, and this will put the blue line round the outside of the image with circles or nodes at different points around the outside. Now, not disregarding this top button here, which is used for rotating, what you want is the center node here, which will give you, if you put the cursor over it, you get a double-ended arrow. You need to click and hold that, and then just drag the whole lot down to the bottom, and let go when you get to the bottom of the screen, and there you have your reflection of what is above. We just come off the move tool, so the outline has gone, and what we're now going to do is I'm just going to rename these layers just to make it a little bit easier and less confusing about which layer we're going to work on. Now, the top layer, if I double click on that, and I'm going to name this reflection, and then double click on the bottom layer and rename this photo, just so I don't get confused about which version I want to be working on. You don't have to do that. This is just something that I saw in a video, and I thought that was a good idea because there's a lot of tinkering with different layers and you can't get confused which one you're actually looking at. So what I now want to do is to highlight the bottom or photo layer, and I'm going to make a new layer, which is this icon down here, and then that will add a blank layer between reflection and photo. And just for fun, I'm going to name that one water, because this is where the color of the water is we are going to add below. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on the rectangle marquee tool, or you can press M, and I'm going to draw out a marquee rectangle over the bottom half of this image, and as this highlight, the water layer is highlighted, what I'm going to do next will only affect that layer within that area. So I'm going to come to the fill tool, and now I need a blue color to fill this selected area with. Now you can pick whichever blue you like, but I have a particular color that I want to use, so it's 11 for the red, 22 for the green, and 183 for the blue channel, and then I will just click inside the selected area, and you won't actually see anything happen at the moment, but if I turn off the reflection layer, as you can see, that now is covered in a solid blue. So I'll just press Ctrl and D to lose the selected area. Right, I'm just going to change the tool quickly here, just so I don't mistakenly fill anything I don't want to. Right, and next thing I'm going to do, I just want to make sure that the top reflection layer is highlighted, and I'm going to come up to Filters, Blur, Motion Blur, and this rotation, you can rotate it to wherever you want to set the direction of the blur, but I'm going to set mine at pointing straight up. Now let's be different. Let's try it there. I'm going to set it on 180 degrees. Now, on the written tutorial I've set it on 90, but just to see how different this will end up looking, I'm going to go for 180, and then you can alter the how much strength and how much blur there is. I'm going to lower this one down to about 30. I think it was 35 when I did the written tutorial, so this will end up looking slightly different than that version. So now we're already starting to look like a reflected water, you know, with the image above. Now what we need to do now is just to, if sometimes when you use a motion blur, it starts to show what is going on below. So and as below there is a dark blue layer, sometimes you will see the dark blue line appearing. If you click on perspective, you can just nudge this up slightly, and then that will help hide any line that may have appeared. So moving on now, the next thing we need to do is to add a layer mask to this top layer here. So just make sure it is highlighted, and then one of the icons down here on the bottom of the layer display area is mask layer, which is like this white square with a black circle in it. If you click on that, it will add a layer mask to this layer. Now we are going to add a gradient to this layer mask, so just if you click on the downward arrow that have appeared here, you will see highlight, make sure that it's the mask that is highlighted, and that is what we're working on, not on the image that is underneath it. And then we need the gradient tool. Now the gradient tool is down here just under the flood tool, so you just click on that, and then the options we have going along the top here, where it says none, come down and click on linear, and then next to it you have the color panel. If you click on that, it will open up some options, And if you come to swatches, now this is probably one of the worst graphical elements I've found in Affinity Photo, because it is very hard to tell without putting the cursor over certain points of this as to which gradient you are picking. But if I just quickly go to PhotoPlus, if I pick the gradient tool and click on that, it is much bigger, much brighter. You can see directly what gradient you are picking. I mean, admittedly, when you put the cursor over, it should tell you which one you are on, but graphically you can see what it is that you are going to be using. But like I said, in Affinity Photo, those graphics are so small, it's very difficult to work out what it is you're going to pick. But the one we are after is black to white. Now, before I rush on ahead, there's something I forgot to mention earlier when I was talking about adding the gradient to the mask. You do need to highlight the mask, because at the moment there's a white line going around the icon of the image. If I click on the drop down menu, both the mask and the image are highlighted. But if I just click on the mask and drop this down, then only the mask is being highlighted, and you can add the gradient to that mask area. So I will now take you back to where the video tutorial should be. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, I just clicked somewhere to shut down the panel that had opened, which you can do just by just clicking somewhere out here and it will close. Now, up here in the top left hand corner there is a white circle. If you just click and hold on that and drag it down to the bottom of the screen, and then bring the top one down to the midpoint, that will now gradually reveal from darker to the light the image below. You have a midpoint slider here which you can alter at what point this gradient starts to really have effect. I'm just going to drop it down to about there, so it's darker at the bottom of the image and gets lighter as it goes up towards the top. So that is the gradient tool, and now this is the point where we come up to the two versions of how to add ripples to this water image. Now I'll just come off this tool, come up to the hand tool. So at this point I would say to you to save where we are up to. So you can come to File, Save As, and then save it as an Affinity file, which is AF photo file, and then that will save all your layers and what have you. So we can come back and try version 2. So let me just go do that and then I'll be back in a second. Okay, I've now saved that image. Let me just close that down. I'm going to highlight this top layer and I'm going to right click it and come down to Merge Visible. This will make a merged copy of all the layers as a new layer at the top, and it is to this that we are going to add the ripple effect. And to do this I need a ripple image, and the one I'm going to use is this one here, which I got from a royalty-free website called pixabay.com. But if you have your own, or you can make your own, that's all well and good. So I'm just going to come up to select all, edit, copy, and then come back to the image I'm working on, and then I'm going to edit and paste. Now luckily for me this particular ripple image fits pretty much the proper width and almost the proper height. But I'll just come to the move tool and I'll just nudge that over and then nudge the bottom up to the midpoint. Now if you've got the snapping on, when you move this, the snapping lines will appear to show you that you're at like the midpoints and what have you. So I have that on the midpoint, and then all I'm going to do is come up to the top node, click and hold, drag it down to the bottom, and then the snap line should appear to let me know that I'm in the right place for that to be covering the bottom half of the image. So what I'm going to do now is to displace this onto the image below. So what I'm going to do is come to layers, new live filter layers, and displace filter, which opens up this panel here, and you have two options here, which is load map from file or load map from layers beneath. So I'm going to click on the load map from layers beneath button, and then when I change the strength, it doesn't really matter whether you go left or right, the end result is going to be pretty much the same. It just depends on which part of the ripple it is altering. Now if you go too high, the effect can start to bleed over into the top half of the image. So I stick around, for my particular image, somewhere between 125, 130. But I'm just going to lower this slightly so it's not quite the same as how I did it before. And then once you've got that finished, you can just click on the X, and that will have now taken effect. Now you can then change the blending mode of this, highlight this layer that we've just done, and then change the blending mode. You can pick whichever one takes your fancy really, but I like to use screen, and then lower the opacity down to about 10-12%. Let's make that 11. And then the next thing I do is to come to filters, blur, Gaussian blur, and have a blur of about 8 or 10%. It would just sort of take some of the edge off those ripples, and then click just to get rid of the move tool handles. Now theoretically you could just sort of end this here. There's just a couple of little minor tweaks which I'm going to just add, and they are sort of quite minor. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure the top layer is highlighted, right click, and again come to merge visible. So we now have another merge version of all this, what we've done so far. And then I'm just going to add a quick gradient to this. I'll just come to gradient, linear, and this time I want to go black to transparent, and I'm just going to quickly alter this so that that's about the center point, and I'm just going to slightly lower this center slider here just so it's much darker at the bottom again, and getting lighter as it goes towards the top. And once you've set the gradient, you can, if you want, just lower the opacity if the black area is a bit too dark for you. So I'll make mine down to there, highlight that top layer again, and then add a new pixel layer. Now this last one I saw on a Photoshop tutorial. If you use the rectangular marquee tool and just draw a fairly thin box across the screen at where these two images join, which is roughly about there, I think. Come to the fill tool, make sure that black is your foreground color. Click inside the selected area and then drop down the opacity to about 10-12%. Press Ctrl and D to get rid of the selected area, and that will just sort of darken the area where the two halves join, just to sort of maybe disguise any join that may still be visible. And then that is the finished image of this version. I will now save this version, but I'll also reload the file that we saved earlier and show you how to do version 2, so I will be back in a little while. Okay, moving on to version 2 of adding ripples to this water effect. Now, unlike the previous version where I merged these layers together to make a new layer to add the water effect to, this time I can leave it with the 3 layers that I already have. And as you may have noticed, I've closed down the water image that I had also open previously, because we are going to use this as a map rather than as an image. Hopefully you will see what I mean in a little while. So you click and highlight on the top layer, so it will only be affecting that layer. And then rather than use it as a live filter, we're going to use it just from the filters menu. So it's filters, distort, displace, and then previously I'd used load map from layers beneath. At this time I'm going to use load map from file, and it will open up the Windows Explorer page, and so you can navigate to wherever it is your ripple image has been stored. Mine is here, so I'll just click on it and then open, and then you may not be able to see it, but there is some slight ripples in the water at the moment. But as I move the cursor, the slider left or right, as you can see, it affects the water. If you go too high, it looks a bit horrible. So I'm just coming down to about 110%. But even then, it's starting to affect the top half of this image. Just a bit too much. I'll just lower it a little bit more. About there will do. Now, when I found that when I click apply, it doesn't end up looking exactly like it does there. It just alters slightly, so that is not too bad. So again, now technically this is where you could finish it, or you could do what I did at the end of the previous version, which is right click, merge visible, quickly add a gradient that is black to transparent, move that to there, move that to the center point, just lower this down slightly, there, add a new layer, get the marquee tool, just draw, it's probably a bit too high, let's try there. Come to the fill tool, make black your foreground color, fill that area, and then lower the opacity down to 10, 12%, 13 will do on that one. Press Ctrl and D just to darken up that center area, just so the join is less visible. And basically that is the end of this tutorial. You now have 2 different ways of making ripples for your image. I hope it wasn't too confusing, and there is the written version that you can download from the Fans of Serif Software Facebook page, and you can follow that while you're making it. All you need to do now is to come to File and Export as a JPEG, or save as an overall file that saves all the layers, whichever way you prefer to save your images. And thank you for watching, and goodbye.